Talk about it, meditation about it, meditation about it.
Yeah, so we'll dive in, Max, and I want to say thank you so much for joining us again on the podcast for the second time. Last time when we were on the podcast, we spoke about many of the different forces that are trying to hold us back and how there is sort of a disharmony on the planet. But as you know, Max, more and more people now are starting to align with the frequency of harmony, if you want to call it that, and people are wanting to try and find and restore that balance again. And I think that's just sort of what proves that, as well as our last conversation that we did on YouTube is up to, I think it's up to 20,000 people now. And then also on the audio version, I think it's about 100,000 people's downloaded it, and many other platforms. So it seems to be that there is and I know your platform on your YouTube channel is getting loads of views as well. So there is a huge, there's a huge sort of need within people's minds now. They are really trying to find sort of harmony with this frequency, if you want to call it that. And it's just, I would love to start this, Max. I would love to ask the question, because it, like it says, it seems to be that people do have a deep thirst for this information. And it's clear to see, like we said in the other podcast, there is people trying to sort of prevent us from stepping into who we truly are. But just to start this, Max, I would love to see your opinion on what do you think is our true nature, and what is our true power?
Oh, look, our true nature is energetic consciousness manifesting reality, a collective manifestation, a collective experience, I would suggest, from a single consciousness that's experiencing itself in every aspect that can be. If you could imagine, to get kind of esoteric about it, and with lack of any other words to use to describe it, if you could imagine if you were an all-powerful being such as God, and you were just there by yourself, it'd be a pretty boring existence by yourself. You'd want to do something. What if you shattered your consciousness into individual fragments so you could experience yourself to discover how you became God? Something like that. I mean, when you look at what this is, it's a collective manifestation of energy. Ultimately, at the very core, we're all energetic beings that come from a single source, which would be the field around you. If you really start looking into the nature of consciousness, you find it's not local to your body. It's simply harvested from the surrounding field. So you can imagine this as being essentially some form of biological computer mechanism, that's fully autonomic, self-functioning, self-correcting, self-balancing, self-healing. All you got to do is put the fuel in it. It needs a consciousness to govern it. Where does that consciousness comes from? Well, within every body, there is a DNA which is unique to you, particular to you. That DNA is like an antenna that harvests a certain frequency from the field that you experience as Tim and I experience as Max, and that's the way it goes. Oh, Dan, sorry, not Tim, Dan. Sorry, wrong show.
You can call us whatever you want. It doesn't matter. When you think about it on a bigger picture, we're not our name anyway, as you're saying.
Yeah. Well, you can experience as you, and I can experience as me, but ultimately it comes from the same source. And it's your DNA picking up on a certain frequency. It's like you got a radio tuned to a particular station. Everybody's their own radio, and it's all tuned to a different station. The station already exists in the field. You can just change the dial and tune into any consciousness you want, but you're tuned, we're all, locked on the dial to a specific consciousness, which is you and which is me. But, if you were to take a kidney out of my body and put it into your body, you'd start experiencing aspects of me. And they say, oh, it's because the organ has memory. No, it's because the organ is tuned to that frequency in the field. So you'll start downloading aspects of my consciousness. Not as much as your consciousness, not enough to override your consciousness, because obviously there's more of you than there is of me in there. But if you get a heart of mine or a liver or a kidney, the more of me you get in there, the more of me you're going to start experiencing. You might get a kidney or a heart transplant and find that suddenly you've got this like for Mexican food that you never had before, and you'll find that the donor liked Mexican food. Things like that, because you download aspects of that personality. So ultimately we're all energy beings. And when you think of thought and thought waves being energy as well, every thought you produce is like a radio wave that goes out into the field. This can manifest your reality back to you. When you think of the collective fear they're putting into the minds of people, well, that's the reality we get mirrored back to us. That's why the world turns into such a chaotic state, because they get people in fear, so we create a fearful reality, you know. And what is impossible? I mean, the only thing that's impossible is that which you believe is impossible. And most people have no idea of what is possible at all, because their entire belief system is centered around what they believe they know, which is what's taught to them, which is all left brain stuff. And it's got to fit within this little scientific box. And if it works outside that paradigm, you don't think about it, it's not possible. You know, but anything's possible. The only thing that's impossible is that which you believe is impossible, and that's what makes it impossible, is your belief in that. So yeah, that's why I don't do belief. And why I've always had no stake in the outcome, I don't do fear. You know, reality will mirror things back to you. They've even hijacked all that, you know, to the law of attraction. You know, what you think about, you will manifest, blah, blah, blah. It's also the emotional state you're in. You know, what I tried to convey in a film that I put out, I think back in 2009 or 2010, called The Awakening, was the fact that we're having a conversation all the time. There's an energetic conversation going on between you and reality all the time, but you're not paying attention. Most people are not paying attention to this conversation. You know, it appears to you sometimes as intuition. Very often you don't listen, but you'll get this feeling that you should do something or you shouldn't do something. You go ahead and you ignore it, and you do this, and everything messes up, and you should listen to my intuition. That's the field talking to you. See, we're having this one-sided conversation all the time. The conversation that we're having is an electromagnetic conversation. It's an emotional conversation. You know, the power of feelings and emotions, it's a language that you're speaking to the field, and the field will mirror that back to you, which is why they keep you in certain emotional states. You know, how I became a radio host back in 2008 was because I had this incredibly profound experience in meditation one night, and I had all these realizations of what I'm talking about now, and I realized it was all an emotional mirror. And I thought, well, being a radio host would be a really good way to get the word out. So I got up and I continued making my clips and doing my YouTube stuff, and, you know, I was just making slideshows and putting them on YouTube. And but I put myself in the energetic state that I was a radio host. So what would it feel like to be a radio host? I didn't know anything about internet radio, didn't know about podcasts, didn't know about any of that sort of stuff. And then within, you know, I just get up and I just do my work. I'd take my son to school. I do all the things that I normally did, but I was a radio host. And it wasn't that I was pretending to be a radio host or anything. It was just, you know, what would it feel like if that was my job, if that's what I did? What energy would I feel like I was in, you know? And I didn't do anything at all to try, but within 6 weeks, I got offered a job as a radio host. I didn't do anything to try to get that job. And it was a real radio station as well. It was like a radio station in Kansas that went out, you could tune in on your car. It wasn't just online radio. It was a proper radio station. I did that for 13, 14 years, you know, and I realized, you know, it's true. It's all an emotional mirror. So, you know, our problem is that we create these goals, and we have a stake in the outcome of these goals. We're taught to, you know, this is our business sense. We've got to create these goals and get to these milestones and stuff. But mostly they're unrealistic. Mostly they're based on economic values and, you know, all the stuff which is wrong completely. And very often, you know, people are, you know, doing these goals in a business manner, and it's all about creating wealth in their lives. And they'll find that the more wealth they create, the more expenses they generate with it, and they live to their means all the time. Doesn't matter if you're making $100 a week or $10,000 a week, you're going to be spending $100 a week or $10,000 a week. You know, your lifestyle seems to change around your income, and people generally live to their means because that's the focus. You know, whereas I just don't think about stuff like that. And you'll find that you live in a natural state of abundance. You don't really want for anything. I mean, I don't have a lot, but I don't want for a lot because I don't need a lot. You know, we misplace our values, and you know, even the law of attraction and all this sort of stuff, it's been taken over from the law of mirroring, which is a more emotional language. They've tried to turn it into an intellectual language, and they've even taken terms such as abundance. They've turned it into prosperity, which makes you think about finances. You just prosper and get wealthy and rich, which that isn't wealth. True wealth is health and friends and companionship and having a safe environment. Happiness. This is wealth. And money doesn't buy that. People think it does. No, money buys you stuff and big stuff and big houses and the bigger front door, and then you can feel that you're better than the neighbour, and all this division takes place, and people get jealous because you've got a bigger front door than them, and it's crazy stuff. So that's just, I've found the way you can live your life and just sort of get through it is to have no stake in the outcome and realise you're speaking this emotional language and go with the flow and allow things to unfold. Don't have your goals too firmly set, because you may miss something along the way, some little sidetrack which is going to lead you somewhere that you didn't even expect, which is where you actually needed to go. So you've got to be careful on what these goals are. I mean, my only goal in life, like they asked me when I was a child at school, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, outrageously happy. And that was my only goal in life, was to be outrageously happy. When I got old, I said, I don't care whether I'm in the gutter or whether I'm living in a castle, as long as I'm outrageously happy. So yeah, I mean, that I think should be the focus. Happiness and improvement of the self and improvement of others. Service to creation. There's only one law I've found, one law of creation, and that is unconditional love and service to creation. And that doesn't mean service to others at the expense of yourself. You've got to love yourself as much as you love others. You can't deplete yourself in the service of others. That doesn't work. You don't love yourself. You're not in service to creation. You're in service to others, which means you're a slave for no reward. So why would you do that? You've got to put everything on an even keel and respect yourself as much as you respect others, but don't respect them any less because you respect yourself, So yeah.
Very, very wise words, brother. Really, really great. And when you were talking about everything being a sort of an emotional mirror, it's really interesting, because what I've recognized in my life is that with that deep understanding you said there, that also comes with great responsibility, because from that position, obviously, then you start realizing how your inner thought can affect your whole world around you. But it's interesting, Max, when you were speaking about when you were doing the meditation session and you had that sort of deep, profound knowledge that came through to you. It's very interesting, because even through my own life now, this seems to be ramping up, but it does seem to be a sort of a deep language, if you want to call it that is permeating through the universe. I know some people's called it God, some people call it consciousness, universe, a Akashic field, whatever you want to call it. But a question I would love to ask you on that I thought of, Max, do you think that that's what we're here to do? We're here to learn that sort of that deep language that is permeating through our lives?
I think it's a difficult question. Why are we here? I mean, I think we are so disconnected from what we could be. We are so inactive from what we could be. I think the first goal, the first quest we should be on is to free ourselves from this system, to be able to reactivate ourselves biologically and get our own biology, get back in control of our own biology. Then I think all of the answers will be clear. I don't think we will need to conduct such a search if we could simply come online. If you can walk the path of the warrior through life, it's like there's a predator here that's feeding on us. This has been alluded to in a lot of texts. I mean, even there's suggestions of it even in religious texts in the Bible and stuff. But if you look at different cultures which would talk about mind parasites, the chitahuri, the Africans call them, the jinn, the Arabs call them, the blue jinn, the genie. The Native Americans call it the Wetiko virus. The Gnostics call it the archons. I mean, whatever it is, the Native Americans just refer to it as the predator mind. It's this mind that makes us do things we don't want to do, and makes us ask questions about things we don't need to know, and makes us search for answers in all sorts of places which are external to ourselves. And it would appear, and this is alluded to in many shamanistic teachings, that what this force likes to harvest from us is these aha moments that we have when we're searching. So, if you can not be surprised at what you find when you're looking for things, and realize that the only reason you're looking down that rabbit hole, searching that particular field, is because you actually already know. And if you can look within, you'll find that you won't have those aha moments, and you can free yourself of this predator mind. And when you can do that, things become clear in your head, and amazing feats of knowledge and comprehension can be achieved just by a matter of course, without really needing to search. You'll find that if you're prepared to believe yourself and believe your intuition and listen to your intuition, you'll find that you already know a lot of things you're just not prepared to admit. And the big problem that we're facing here is a loss of self. Something I've attempted to do with all of my radio shows right since the beginning. Well, I've been focusing on COVID and freedom and the emergency we're in lately, but if you listen to my radio shows, there's been an underlying message through the whole lot for the last 10 or 12 years is to lead people back to themselves. It's about the rediscovery of the self. And I can't teach you who you are. I can't teach other people who they are. All I can do is help them discover that for themselves. And, you can't tell people the truth because they won't believe you. They won't listen. The only way to get people to the truth is to help them discover it themselves. It has to be realized. Real truth can't be told. It has to be realized. Even the stuff that is because you had that aha moment. A little light bulb went off. Someone might have led you to the doorway, but ultimately you walked through and you had that moment. And that's what I've attempted to do with my radio shows and all my films, is just encourage people to ask questions, ask the right questions. And I've kind of led them to certain doorways, and they can be prepared, they can make up their own mind as whether they're prepared to open that doorway and to walk through and ask those questions, and whether they're spiritually and emotionally and psychologically ready for the answers that they're going to find. Because, the darkness is pretty dark. It's pretty black. And if you're not prepared to see just how dark it is, you should never look into the shadow. And that's why I don't just tell people things outright and make statements, outright blanket statements usually. Maybe I've slipped up sometimes and done that, but we all do. But it's mainly encouraging people to ask questions, because it's a loss of self. That's the problem. And that is only something that people can discover on their own if they're prepared to. And a lot of people aren't. A lot of people simply aren't prepared to. They don't want to know what all the problems are. They just want to be left alone and try to get through this. But, I think there's a lot of healing that can be made if people are prepared to look into the shadow. I think it's people's refusal to look into the shadow which allows the shadow to persist. But, it's an uncomfortable place for a lot of people to go, because they have to admit that their life has been a lie, that it's been meaningless. They've been doing all this stuff which was completely meaningless and unnecessary. And that's been one good thing about this lockdown. Maybe people will realize just how worthless their jobs were and all this stuff they were doing that they really didn't need to do anyway. It was just all to take up time and collect paper. Perhaps there will be some sort of a spiritual enlightenment that comes out of all of this. But of course, attempting to push it the other way. But it's all about a loss of self, brother. That's the whole thing. I've often said, if people could just have that epiphany in their minds and just go, oh my God, I have value, and just realize what they are. If we all did it at once and we suddenly didn't tolerate wrong behavior anymore and just did the right thing and saw everybody else as a reflection of ourselves, which is why I say in Lakesh at the end of every show, which means I am another yourself. If everyone just had that epiphany, we could change the world in 3 seconds, like bang, like that. It'd be changed. If everyone just had that realization, well, at least we could change it in a day. But if it was an epiphany, we could change it right away. Imagine if everyone just suddenly saw everybody else as a reflection of themselves and refused to tolerate wrong behavior. The whole facade would fall away right now.
Yeah, Max, that was really powerful stuff, by the way, and it's really powerful, some of the stuff you were talking about there, because it is clear that we have sort of forgot who we are. And when you touched on a couple of the ancient cultures there, I would love to ask you a question about that, because all that sort of that deep knowledge that you were speaking of there, Max, it's really interesting that a lot of the ancient cultures, if we look back at them, actually understood that deep language. How do you think that they understood, ancient cultures actually understood that deep language that you were just talking about there?
I think it was just the way we lived. I think this is knowledge that's been taken from us. I think it was just common knowledge with everybody. When you look at the structures and the buildings and the artistic nature of everything that existed in the past, I think it was just the way things were. We may wonder how people could have had this knowledge, and it may appear like magic to us, but that's only because we've been taught this left brain education for the last couple of generations, and we've been taught what is real and that it only fits within scientific parameters. I think it was common knowledge, brother. I really do. All you've got to do is look at some of the ancient structures and some of the buildings and architectures and stuff that we marvel at, saying, ancient wonders of the past, and we haven't got the scientific know-how to do that. And gee, how did they do it? Because they thought completely differently. They had completely different technology. They had a different way of looking at themselves and a different way of applying themselves to life, a different almost symbiotic relationship with the earth that we live on. We've lost all of that, and it's been taken from us. Like I said, if you could just free yourself of this predator mind and have this calmness, the saying is to be able to face infinity without flinching, to be able to face with serenity odds that are not expected, not included in your expectations. That's the way to get through it. And to find yourself and to create that calmness within. If we could do that, and the fact that our pineal gland is so calcified, so we're only experiencing such a small part of reality anyway. We don't have any real spiritual or emotional connection that we understand due to our pineal being closed. If you look at DMT, dimethyltryptamine that some people use as a drug, they smoke it or whatever. It's also active in ayahuasca and things like that. It's also active in your body. It's produced in your spine apparently, and it's distributed through your brain by your pineal gland. Well, our pineal gland is mainly calcified, so we're not having that distribution of DMT through our system that we should. And but we do have a bit in our body. I mean, if we didn't have DMT in our body, we wouldn't dream, we wouldn't see in color. So we just have just enough for us to experience, a bit of reality. But the DMT and something else in our body called tryptophan. Tryptophan is in everything. It's in plants, it's in animals, it's in everything. And nobody really knows what it's for. And I would suggest that tryptophan is actually like an antenna, like your DNA. Tryptophan is the interface that reality uses to communicate with itself. And if we had more active DMT, dimethyltryptamine, in our body, we would be able to use the communicate to nature through the tryptophan in our body. And we would call this instinct. It's like how animals know to leave an area before it floods because they know there's a hurricane coming. Birds, tribal people will leave the area too because they know there's a tsunami coming or an earthquake before it happens. They all pack up and they leave. Then there's a disaster. Because the pineal's still open, the tryptophan in their body is active and they can access the tryptophan in nature, and they notice the frequency is changing, so they get out of the area. See, we don't have that in our Western cultures. We've had this aspect of communication taken away from us. So there's more than the five senses. There's other ways of communicating with the world rather, just by looking at a tree and smelling it and seeing it and hearing the wind rustle. That's just a few ways of communicating with it. There's a symbiotic, energetic way you can communicate emotionally with the tree as well. There's an area near here called the Crystal Castle, and they have these instruments hooked up to trees, hooked up to these little electronic synthesizers. And when you can go and sit in the garden there, if you sit next to the tree will play you a tune. And it starts off a little nervous when it starts playing. And if you don't like the tune, it'll stop playing. And if you do like the tune, it'll get more confident and the tune will expand and get more and more creative. And it picks up on your emotions. But if you don't like it and you think, I don't really like that, it'll change the tune until it finds one you like. You don't have to say anything, but it'll find one. And as soon as you start thinking, oh, gee, I like that, it gets really confident and it starts doing. So it's energetically communicating with you. It's reading your emotions, the tree, and it's playing you a tune. So sentient life is everywhere. And there is a whole other levels of communication that we're not experiencing. So I think that's something that's very important for people to take into account when understanding how this whole system works. And why they push all this fear into people, why they keep you worried about all these mundane, meaningless things rather than ever paying any attention to yourself and to what your relationship with the trees and the rocks and everything around you actually is.
Do you? I've got two questions, Max. I don't know what I want to ask you, but when you were speaking about the senses there, it was really cool stuff. I was actually going to ask you the question. I know there's definitely a splitting of consciousness on the planet, but there also definitely seems to be an uprising of them senses where more and more people are connecting to them senses as well. So maybe that's my first question. And the second question, just to add to it, if I can try and blend the two, was do you think that the ancients maybe had a way to affect that human frequency?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think the pyramids are any mystery either, how they were built. I think they were poured. It tells you on a stele in near Zaire in Egypt, there's a stele there called the famine stele, and it describes the pouring of three monuments, the building of three monuments out of a synthetic limestone. They just, boxed it up and poured them. You can do it, all the materials there. It's like a form of concrete. It's a form of geopolymer that they're made of. There's the granite, the granite sarcophagus and all that in the central area is still quite spectacular, but I don't think there's any mystery how they were built. But yeah, I think they had a way of harnessing all of this stuff. I think some of the mystery structures that we see, I don't think that would have been so mysterious at all if you knew how reality worked. With levitation, frequency. I mean, a lot of the old stone structures that we see that seem so mysterious, like the stone walls in South America, these all appear to have been poured out of molten stone that was then solidified. So they're all basically forms of geopolymer. I don't think there's any really great mystery to them at all. It's just technology that we're not aware of, because again, we've got to only think within the realms of science. We wouldn't ever think of getting plant extracts and rubbing them on stones to make the stones soft and, pouring them as buckets of mud into bigger blocks. But that's what I would suggest happened, and that's what a lot of the natives in South America would say as well. And that's what the famine stele says in regard to the pyramids being built. But, as far as our consciousness, they knew that, what sort of a world you could create. I'm sure they did through consciousness. I think we are far, far more powerful than people would ever give us credit for, because they're taught not to believe in such things. They're taught it's magic. But I don't believe any history. I don't believe any of the stuff we're told about the past. I think things changed quite recently, actually, like within the last probably even a couple of 100 years, 200 or 300 years. I think it was a very, very different world here on Earth. I think there was a worldwide civilization that existed on Earth, the remnants of which can still be found everywhere. And I just don't believe a thing we've been told. But, a lot of the problem now is, there is a huge awakening happening with people being locked away and people realizing just how corrupt the system is. This whole lockdown, this whole overreaction for, what's happened, a lot of people are getting it. But it's where they're going to direct that awakening, whether they're going to be wanting government to come and rescue them or whether they're really taking the time to look within. It's a huge opportunity for us, this whole lockdown, this whole implementation of this new world order system they want to bring in, this whole smart system. It's right in everybody's face now. And I think it's a huge opportunity for people to push back. So this could be a time of incredible freedom that could lead us to a really good place if we play our cards properly. That's why I've been spending so much focus on it. I've been focusing on it almost every day. I've been doing uploads and talking about the current situation because, we're at a very historical moment. We're at a pivotal point in history right now. I can't think of anything previously in any time in recorded history that I know of that has been as significant as what we're going through now, the type of change we're going through now. Even looking back at the Industrial Revolution, which I don't even buy into being what we're told it was anymore. Now I have a different understanding of history. But I think a lot of what has happened in the last 300-400 years, it's all been culminating to this very point we are at now. And which is why it's so important for people to understand their emotions and understand the power of their emotions and what we can do with this moment. But very, very interesting times we're in, brother. A lot of people, they want to talk about history, but they don't realize this is history. What we're doing right now, this is history. Very, very significant history, which is going to be remembered as long as the human race continues. This is going to be one of the most pivotal moments that has ever ever been.
Yeah, I love that. I would love, Max, as well, just maybe ask one more question as well. I would love to ask you the question of how do you think, I know we've been talking around the sense of consciousness, and all the stuff's been really great, by the way, some great points. You've said some stuff that I want to definitely go back to and listen to again and research. But when you were talking before about the grand scale of consciousness, how do you think free will plays into the plans of the grand scale of consciousness?
Everything. It's all based on free will. Everything we're doing now is based on free will. We don't have to do any of this. Even our choice of having governments is based on free will. We choose to go and vote. We choose to participate in all this. We choose to give our authority away. Great book by Larkin Rose called The Most Dangerous Superstition, which is about authority. It's the belief in authority. It's all free will. This whole existence is based in free will. Free will interaction, contractual interaction, free will interaction, free will contractual interaction. Anything you do is a contract. Any conversation you have with someone is a contract. You know, if you look at it that way, get all the monetary sense of a contract out of the idea, but it's a contract of souls, a free exchange, if you will. You know, so, and it's all based on free will. We have the free will to throw away our smartphones, to turn away from this system, to say no, and to suddenly support each other and see ourselves in each other, and not measure ourselves by the size of our front doors. We have the free will to do this anytime we choose to do it. I mean, I chose to make that decision years ago. You know, I gave away just about everything I own, sold the rest so I had enough to survive, severed ties with all government institutions, no unemployment, no nothing, don't want anything to do with anything you guys have got. And, you know, it was my free will to do so. And I've just kind of bounced through the world for the last 15 years that way. And, yeah, it's all about free will. We have the free will to say no to this anytime. I wish people would. But they think someone's got to come along and save them, is the problem. They're not prepared to save themselves, because they're not prepared to discover themselves. They don't want to know the true power they have. They want someone to come and save me. They want to, you know, Max will come and save us. We'll hold his coat while he goes and fixes the world. And then I'll get the newsletter that the world's changed. And then I can go back to work and do all this mundane shit that I was doing before. You know, if the world's going to change, why do people think all that mundane stuff's still going to be there? You know, the problem is they want a new nanny. It's like the Q movement. You know, Q is going to come and save the day because we don't like the old nanny. So the new nanny is going to come along, the Q nanny, and it's going to look after us. It's still a new nanny. If you're waiting for anyone on a white charger to come along and change the world for you, it's because you're not prepared to change yourself. And all you have to do is change yourself, and then the world changes. But I won't do it until he does it. But he won't do it until you do it. So you're just stuck in this loop, you know. Lead by example in all that you do. Be the change you want to see in the world, and that's how the world will change. But don't wait for someone to come and save you. If you're not prepared to save yourself, what makes you think you're worth saving anyway? You know, it's a question a lot of people don't really want to ask themselves. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy just to be a good person and to do the right thing in all that you do. And if you do that, you'll find that the world will look after you. It just works. I'm living proof that it works. I mean, I give, I do all I can to help other people. I don't stress about stuff. I have no stake in the outcome. And, you know, I just know that if my heart is pure, the universe will guide me to where I need to be. And I don't have any stress about that. I don't even think about it. I don't even expect it. I just know that's what will happen. So it does, because it's all an emotional mirror. You know, no stake in the outcome. I don't do fear. So, you know, it's pretty easy to step away from the system. You know, the problem is that, you know, we have all these things we think we need to measure ourselves by, and all these standards and all these social standards and all these things we think we should be, and all this external stuff we gather. And along the way, we never really find ourselves. And that's what it's all about. And you can do that now. You can do that anytime you choose to disconnect from that and just look within. You can do it. So, yeah, it's a great opportunity, brother. And I hope that's what people do at this time.
I love that. Thank you so much again, Max. We'll leave it there. Honestly, powerful podcast, by the way. And as always, you just your knowledge, honestly, brother, is amazing. Really is great. Like, really is.
Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate that. It's not really knowledge. It's just sharing a perspective. It's just my life experience of what's worked for me. And, you know, I kind of found it all out in the school of hard knocks. So hopefully it will save a few hard knocks on other people if they just consider these possibilities of a different perspective. And you'll find that if you do it, your life will change. It has with me, and it has with many other people that I know. I know people that have changed their lives completely by realizing it's an emotional mirror, and it'll mirror back to you what you put out there. So, it just works. But thanks for having me on, brother. Always a pleasure.